Wayne, you all got screen sharing abilities, and so does your panelists. This is just in case you want to share the agenda if you want to put it up for a second or so.
Okay. So while we wait, I just want to share the agenda.
Thank you. Wow.
So actually, Tanya and Vivian, you're on the agenda.
Oh, we're agenda items. I could have told you that a long time ago.
Okay. So we actually have, we've got sort of a restructured committee. We're up to 9 members, but we have 5 members present. So we have quorum, and we have a number of things on the agenda. So why don't I call the meeting to order at 7:05?
Wayne, you also have Council Member Sean Abreu joining us as a panelist. He's on the call.
Yes, they're actually one of the agenda items. So is he joining us as well as his staffer, or just Ms. Moore?
I see the name of Sean Abreu, and whoever's there can speak. So if it's the council member, you should know in a second.
Okay. Because I just got an email from Amber, so I know I'm expecting Amber to join us. But we also would welcome if the councilman joined us as well. So let me welcome everyone to the October 12th, 2022 meeting of the Land Use Committee. I'm Wayne Benjamin. I chair Land Use for CB12, and I think I've been doing this for about 19 years, and it's time for me to let someone else do it and for me to go and, get a villa in Tuscany. I mentioned that we have a restructured committee. So before I have the members who've been around a while introduce themselves, I'd like to give James Bosley, who is our brand new Land Use Committee member, an opportunity to introduce himself. So James, why don't you unmute yourself and say hello? You're still muted, James.
Hi. Yes, James Bosley, that is me, and I am new to the community board and to this committee. I'm happy to be on this committee. I think it's a very important one. I am the founder of Up Theater Company. Some of you who have come to our plays, I know. We produce new and exciting and urgent work here in Northern Manhattan. That is our mission, to bring theater to our sister neighborhoods of Washington Heights and Inwood. And I'm 20-year resident of Inwood. And thank you for allowing me to introduce myself.
And what is the name of your theater company again?
Up Theater Company, because we are uptown. And we perform in a lot of our local houses of worship, from the Tabernacle to various church basements and attics, wherever we can, because we really are waiting for a true venue, theater venue, to be able to do it. So we have to build our theater every time we produce a play. We've been working mostly with the Collegiate Church on Washington and 181st lately. We've been there for like the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you and welcome.
Thank you.
So going through the list of my other committee members based on how I see them. Jim Jim, you're muted.
Hello, everyone. I am Jim. I've been on the community board yet longer than Wayne.
Yeah. Well, actually, we now have two Jims. So you're Jim Berlin to distinguish you from Jim Bosley.
Well, James, maybe James likes being called James.
Okay.
Okay, you be James and I'll be Jim. How's that?
Okay. And you're both JBs.
Look at that.
Look
What's
at
your middle
that.
initial?
So Vivian. So for some reason, everyone's muted. So Vivian, you are muted. Vivian, you are still muted.
Unfortunately, I can't unmute her. She has to unmute herself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
For some reason, I can't see the screen anymore since you sent that. So I'll just speak without seeing. I'm Vivian Ducat. I live in the lower part of the Heights. And I've been on this board, on this committee for almost as long as Wayne has. I'm the public member and I find it very interesting.
Okay, I stopped sharing. Can you now see the screen?
Yes.
Bravo.
Amazing. So it was you.
Okay. Tanya.
Hi, I'm Tanya and a member of Land Use Committee. And yeah, nice to see everybody.
Who else do I have on here? Kimberly, who is also fairly new to the Land Use Committee.
I am very new. Hi, I'm Kimberly McCoy. I also live in Washington Heights in the lower part, like I guess around the bridge. And I'm happy to be here. This is my second land use meeting.
Yeah, that's kind of the middle part. I'm way down.
Not the bridge near the Bronx. 155.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Another bridge.
The other bridge. The other bridge. So those are our committee members present. We have a few who are not. And since we are not meeting on the regularly scheduled day of land use, which is always the first Wednesday of the month, those absences are all excused, although we do look forward to other members joining if they can do so a bit later. We also have with us a board member. Bruce, why don't you unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello.
So that's Bruce Robertson, a member of CB12, although not a member of the Land Use Committee. So welcome all. At last month's meeting, we had a presentation by someone from the Urban Land Institute sharing with us information on a sort of an Urban Land Institute workshop that was focused on, public officials, and by public officials, they meant members of the land use committees of community boards 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And the whole idea was to take a sort of a semester's worth of urban planning work, condense it into an all-day workshop, and then have the various attendees sort of role play, taking on different roles that you would encounter if you were responding to a RFP for a project in a fictitious community. So for Community Board 12, we had 2 or maybe 3 members of our committee, because I think Vivian, Tanya, and Kimberly said they registered, and I just wanted them to give us some feedback on their experience. And I understand our committee won the competition. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So tell us about that.
Correct.
About winning or about?
Well, about your experience with the Urban Land Institute workshop.
I thought it was a really exciting afternoon and day. It was hard for us to stay within our roles, actually, because there was such pressure on us to get things done that it seemed like eventually what was most important was what we built with our Legos, and that It's been a long time since I played with them. I would say there were a lot of professionals who were hovering over us. And though I learned from all of them, there was too much hovering to like be able to focus on what we were doing. That's the downside. And the upside is that it was just really exciting to be in a group of people like that and to have this goal of what we were trying to do.
Yeah, I agree with Vivian. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot of activity. It was a very, very hectic day. We did have a lot to accomplish in a very short period of time. For me, I think it definitely, was eye-opening in terms of introducing us to some of the challenges of some of these projects and the challenges of getting buy-in from those who would determine the fate of these projects, and also the tug of war among other stakeholders in the community and others, pulling in different directions and trying to find a happy medium, if one even exists, because some were so diametrically opposed to each other in terms of what they wanted and what they didn't want, that it was almost impossible to find that compromise. But Vivian was the neighborhood liaison. That was her role, which she did very well, by the way. I was a site planner, so I was in the hot seat, sure.
Welcome to the hot seat.
Yeah, I was in the hot seat. I'm used to the hot seat. Listen. I was a journalist for many, many years, a newspaper reporter and an MBA. You can survive all of that. You can survive, but it was still really, really tough because of the pressures. And I think our team was really great. We really tried to find a way to really support the needs of the community that we were given. Vivian actually thought of the name for our community, and it was amazing. She thought of it on the top of her head, just came out of nowhere, and it was brilliant. By the way, it was absolutely brilliant.
But
okay?
Do you know that the one thing that we did that the other two groups did is that we kept the homeless shelter, and you could either give up $1 million and not have the homeless shelter. And we're the only ones who tried to figure out how to weave it into the physical community. And I think that that's part of why we won.
And I think, we really seem to, as a team, understand that the needs of the city, the needs of our company, a fictional developer company, and also the needs of the community. And we really wanted to design a community that would really support communities into the future. And I think the people were really impressed by that as well. The city council members, fictional, were hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. They asked really tough questions, and they were just like, I'm trying to get reelected. So I don't care about any of this. I just want to know who's against this, and whoever that is, how many of those people. Okay, well, that I'm against it too. And so it was just so hilarious. They played their roles perfectly. Really kept us on the hot seat, asked really tough questions. And I think for me, it was just eye-opening. It helps me to understand better questions to ask when people come before our committee, to really look and know kind of different things to look for in these proposals. And so I highly recommend it to anybody else who wants to, next time they do this, to do it from this committee, because it really opened my eyes and helped me gain more knowledge. And I think we as committee will ask smarter questions, in the future, by doing that process. So yeah, and I was, of course, being competitive, as we all were. I was happy we won, because it was tough competition. The other teams were no joke either. I mean, they were, so so I thank you, Wayne, and for helping to organize that and getting them here to tell us about it and helping us to make sure we participated in that project. So I'm really grateful. Everything stands for improvement. But I wish it was a little longer. So I know the limitations, people being working and they can only really limit it to kind of one day. But I really thoroughly got a lot out of it, and I highly recommend it.
Sounds great. Kimberly, anything you want to add?
No, actually, I didn't get to go. I had to cancel, but I did cancel with enough time so that it wouldn't affect the grouping, because I didn't, and now I'm glad I did, because if Vivian and Tanya didn't win, I'd have been very upset. So, so I appreciate that, but I had to work, so I had to miss it.
Okay. So, I mean, I'm glad, Tanya and Vivian, that you participated, and sounds like you got a lot out of it. I think from what I'm hearing, you really hit the nail on the head in terms of the intent of the program, of understanding, the complexity of, not only putting the projects together, but getting, buy-in from someone who wants to go left, someone who wants to go right, and someone who don't care about where you want to go. So, I think this was a great experience. So with that, speaking of, planning, let's move to the next item on the agenda, which is presentation by City Planning on its Equitable Development Data Tool. And as I mentioned last month, we had a brief overview of this by Olivia Olmos of City Planning several months ago, and she mentioned that in the fall, the team, that is kind of spearheading it, that has more, information and expertise, would come and present. And so they're with us this evening. So Olivia, why don't I turn the floor over to you, and you can introduce your team, and your team can take it away. And by the way, you are muted.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction, Wayne. Like Wayne mentioned, we're with you all in July for a zoning 101 training, and we're excited to give a second training tonight. I'm an Upper Manhattan Borough planner, and I'm joined by two colleagues, and I'll let them introduce themselves while I go ahead and get the screen sharing going.
Hey guys, we met last month. It was Jose Trucio's Upper Manhattan team leader. Happy to be here and fulfilling our promises. And huge thank you to Laura Maria, who's gonna introduce herself in a little bit, but person responsible for helping us put all these materials together for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lara Marita. I'm Senior Director for Community Planning and Civic Engagement, which is a brand new division that is going to be focused mostly on working with communities to think about planning and thinking about how we do civic engagement and how we can work together more. And I'm really excited to be here today. You may remember I was here actually, I guess it was 2 years ago with Ryan and Annie.
The old team.
Yes, I'm still here. I'm still here. And we had a conversation around data around racial equity then, which was prior to the tool being developed. And so we're really excited today to talk a little bit more about it with you and answer any questions and really get some feedback too, because, everything we do can always be improved. So let's talk about how, what things we can be thinking about as well.
And what is your title again?
It's Senior Director for Community Planning and Civic Engagement. It's a bit long. I'm trying to figure out how to shorten it, but I want to make sure it's clear.
No, it's clear.
Yeah. Okay, so pass it to you, Olivia.
Great, thank you. Before we get started, Wayne, can you please enable the screen sharing feature?
I believe Paola said that all the panelists have screen sharing ability.
Right now I'm seeing the message, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Try it again, please. Try it again.
Okay. There we go. All right, are you all seeing me in the lower right-hand corner along with the slides? This is a fun new way to present.
Yes.
Terrific. All right, so as we did last time, tonight's presentation will conclude with a Q&A. We can decide how to handle that. Maybe type the questions in the Q&A function, or feel free to raise your hand at the end of the presentation. Wayne will help moderate the Q&A portion. And like I said, tonight's presentation is really just a general orientation into the Equitable Development Data Explorer. This is a tool created by the Department of City Planning, along with the Department of Housing, Preservation, and Development. This was created early this year. The data tool was developed pursuant to recent legislation introduced by City Council, and it really aims to advance the city's work to promote fair housing and equitable development across all 5 boroughs. And the session tonight will cover the Where We Live New York City report. We'll cover requirements for racial equity reporting, how to understand the Displacement Risk Index, as well as how to better understand and use community data that's provided by the city. And so the Equitable Development Data Explorer, which we call EDDE, it's an interactive and web-based interface, and it allows the public to explore data about housing conditions, demographics, and public health in all 5 boroughs. And the tool really advances the city's work to break down barriers to information and contributes to discussions on topics of equity and inclusive neighborhoods. And this tool was required by Local Law 78 that came about last year in 2021. And the Data Explorer includes a city map, and that city map illustrates levels of risk that residents face as a group that make it really difficult to stay in their home or their neighborhood. So what's neat about this tool, it combines data about factors and contributes to data displacement risk. And this kind of comparatively indicates the level of risk among different neighborhoods. So certain applications for land use changes are required to produce a racial equity report, which we've talked a little about in our previous overview, but this uses information that's pulled from the data tool, and it assists racial equity discussions during the public land use process that we call ULURP. And the tool is really useful. It provides planners and communities with reliable shared data about New York City and again about its neighborhoods. But the resource also allows communities to advocate for both individual needs, and it serves as a resource to provide context when we're talking about race and equity in proactive planning, as well as in the review of proposals that come about. So the tool for racial equity reports kind of serves as the basis, the main tool. And in the online data tool, you can find 60+ indicators. Those are updated frequently, and they cover the neighborhood level, the borough level, and the citywide scale. And these indicators are shown across time. They're broken up by race and ethnicity, wherever that's possible. So those are categories like demographics, household economic security, housing production, even neighborhood quality of life or access to opportunity, as well as the displacement risk index, which we'll cover in a few slides. Actually, in the next slide, here we go. So we're calling this the DRI for shorthand. The DRI map of the city illustrates level of risk that residents face as a group, and whether they're able to remain and stay in their neighborhood or in their homes. And the map combines data about housing and demographics to indicate the level of displacement risk in different neighborhoods comparatively, but it also provides context for the consideration of proposed projects while also supporting continued developments that help New Yorkers stay put. And the map represents a snapshot of current conditions, but it doesn't provide enough information to predict the effect of future changes, so changes to zoning or housing supply, for example. So here we have the displacement risk index components. We're calling it the index. It includes 3 thematic data categories that represent primary factors that appear to contribute to displacement risk. So here you have it: population vulnerability, housing conditions, and market pressure. And so to ensure that each data point within the 3 categories is meaningfully represented in the index, the overall number of data points was somewhat limited. We didn't include potential data categories that lacked research to demonstrate a clear relationship with displacement. But the values of the indicators in the EDDE tool, including the DRI tool, will be updated when that data is, updated or provided. And for example, surveys like the American Community Survey is updated yearly. The Census Survey is updated once per decade. The Housing Vacancy Survey is every 3 years. So EDDE indicators from these sources will be updated along the same timelines. In terms of racial equity reports, so as of June 1st of this year, certain property owners applying for land use changes need to produce a racial equity report, and that's using information pulled from the data tool. So the point of this report, it'll assist racial equity discussions during the public land use review process that we call ULURP, and there's some different components of that report. The report needs to include a community profile pulled from the data tool. It needs to include a narrative statement of how the project relates to the city's goals and strategies to affirmatively further fair housing. It also needs to include project-specific data about anticipated housing units and jobs. And applicants need to provide reports to DCP's lead planners at the time of filing the final land use application, or that needs to be provided at least 30 days before certification or referral. And last thing I'll note about this, the reports are made publicly visible the Friday before certification or referral. So here we have an overview of where racial equity reports apply. The reports are required for specific actions that exceed certain applicability or floor area thresholds. So really they apply to citywide text amendments that affect 5 or more community districts. They also apply to historic district designation that affect at least 4 city blocks. They apply to acquisition or disposition of land to facilitate a non-residential project that contains at least 50,000 square feet of floor area, or a residential project, unless that consists of a building that's going to be preserved. Another area they apply to are actions that result in an increase of permitted residential floor area of at least 50,000 square feet, or an increase in permitted non-residential floor area, and that's by at least 200,000 square feet. They also apply to actions that result in a decrease in permitted floor area or a number of housing units on at least 4 contiguous city blocks. And last thing I'll note, they apply to density or use changes to any M zone related to a building containing at least 100,000 square feet of floor area. So this is a complex chart of criteria and applicability, but we can send this to y'all at the end for review. I'm happy to answer any questions about this at the end. So a brief overview of when this type of report is required. We're really expecting to see more racial equity requirements in the following instances. Projects that increase permitted residential floor area by at least 50,000 zoning square feet, as well as projects that increase permitted non-residential floor area by at least 200,000 zoning square feet. So really the calculations on this slide are showing where it's applicable to entire project areas, which include the development site or any other affected areas. Also, to get permitted zoning square feet, you multiply the area of all the affected sites by the applicable FAR or floor area ratio. So we have those calculations shown here on the screen. And this would also apply to the zoning handbook. In the zoning handbook, you can use that as an essential resource or tool to get this information when you're trying to identify FAR. And we also have a tool called the Urban Renewal Plan, which is useful when you're trying to figure out these calculations. So here we have the Where We Live report, the WWL. This is really a collaborative planning process. It grew out of the city's efforts to develop the next chapter of fair housing policies, really focusing on fighting discrimination, breaking down barriers to opportunity, and building more inclusive neighborhoods. And this planning process was led by the city to better understand impacts and challenges of segregation and discrimination. And this report is a product of HPD's multi-year process, and that process involved working with more than 150 of New York's community orgs, attending dozens of meetings and partnering with dozens of city agencies to really look at impediments to fair housing. And kind of deeply rooted HPD's work. It dug into the history of how we get a diverse but still segregated New York City. And they also identified specific goals to affirmatively further fair housing. And these were organized around 6 main goals you see here on the screen. So primarily combating persistent and complex discrimination, looking at expanded resources and protection. It also looked at facilitating equitable housing developments in New York City and the region, the wider region. It looked at preserving affordable housing and preventing displacement of long-standing residents. It also looked to enable more effective use of residential assistant benefits, especially in amenity-rich neighborhoods. Fifth item, created more independent and integrated living options for people living with disabilities. And in terms of equitable investments, it made equitable investments to address the neighborhood-based legacy of discrimination, as well as segregation and concentrated poverty. And so EDDE and racial equity reports, they're specific actions that came about through this Where We Live report. And the report really identifies negative human consequences within the housing market. It looks at how they emerge from our housing shortage, manifesting as higher housing costs, displacement pressure, gentrification, homelessness, and even unrepressed tenant harassment, which we're seeing. And all these factors are really driven by the fact that there's not enough housing. So the report serves as a broad statement on the city level about real and direct consequences of the housing shortage. And essentially, it's a statement about housing policy. And I'll also note that it's a statement about projects that create more housing in the housing market, as many of these projects come out of the Where We Live report. So racial equity report sections. There's 5 required sections. Section 1's an executive summary that includes a short, plain language summary of the report. The second section is a description of project components that includes reporting on proposed housing affordability and specific jobs. The third is a community profile summary. So that includes graphs and charts. Those are downloaded from the EDDE tool. And they describe neighborhood demographics, as well as socioeconomic and housing conditions. The fourth section, that's a narrative statement. So you're really looking at a statement that describes how project components and neighborhood characteristics relate to the city's commitment to affirmatively further fair housing, as well as promote equitable access to opportunity. And the fifth section, the community profile, includes a full download of all indicators. And that's available in the EDDE, and specifically you can look at indicators for CB12. So in terms of guidance for the community board, the racial equity reports are available upon filing and referred out to the community board and the borough president with all completed application materials. So just want to note that community boards should feel really comfortable asking questions of the applicant on the report content, just as you would with other materials related to any application. And the RER, it's not predictive. So it won't tell us what will happen in the future. It really only tells us what the applicant is proposing relative to current data and whether that proposal aligns with the city's goals that we've outlined. And it's always good practice for applicants to reference charts and graphs and tables in the community profile when reviewing how a proposal may address inequities across different populations and different neighborhoods. And last thing I'll note, the racial equity report is really intended to provide an informed starting point for these conversations between applicants and the community. And that's my overview. I'll go through a few resources we have that are very useful. Here we have a list of these. Wayne, perhaps you can send out this slide. There's hyperlinks on here. We have everything we've talked about today, including triggers and a really strong new EDDE video that kind of sums up what I've talked about today, as well as the Where We Live New York City plan that I encourage y'all to read through if interested.
If you forward this presentation to me, I will of course share it with the land use committee. But I'll ask office staff to maybe post this slide to our website so that everyone can have access to these links.
Great. And with that, our EDDE team is available for questions. This will also be in the presentation. And with that, I'll hand it over. Thank you.
So is there anything that the other city planning representatives have to add to the overview that you just gave? Because you did a wonderful job, but what you said last time is that, they were the experts and, they were going to come and, give us the, the background. So Laura, Jose, anything else you want to add to this?
I mean, Olivia's the expert at this point, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same. We have been working the last 3 weeks and gathering all this information and putting everything together. And I think Olivia has like more information than the people who have put this together. And especially, as I mentioned before, like the people who work on this are no longer at DCP. The people who like put all this. Yeah, so that's another constraint that we have. But Olivia now has become definitely an expert on their on the tool and the report. So we hope to answer all your questions if you have any at the moment.
And I will say that we do have a strong team that, is connected to that distribution list that Olivia showed as the email. We have about 5 people who are kind of reviewing that and making sure that we're getting back to communities and other stakeholders who may be interested. So we do have a team that's really supporting this work and evaluating how the Equitable Development Data Explorer is functioning, but also supporting the boroughs and supporting communities and understanding the racial equity report.
I'm sure there are some questions from committee members, board members, and perhaps also others in attendance, but I just want to begin with 2 things that come to mind, and interestingly, both take me back several decades to graduate school. So when I was in graduate school, I took a course in sort of the impacts, it was sort of a, an urban land assessment. Of course, I believe that was the name of it. And the professor, created a little database that you could put the profile of a project in, and it would, give you some predictive outcomes in terms of, traffic and other things that would, come from that. And of course, the programming and the algorithm of any site is critical, but I'm wondering, you said the racial equity reports, they don't predict what will happen. It's just what the applicant is proposing. But I immediately said, is there some reliable or reasonably reliable system into which you could put a profile of the proposed projects, and based upon data that can be confirmed, what are some likely impacts? So that's the first thing that comes to mind. And the second thing is kind of going to what is the intended impact of the Equitable Development Data Tool, and how that will inform the actions that are ultimately taken by the Department of City Planning and the City Planning Commission. And going back to graduate school, I did my master's thesis on the urban design guidelines for Battery Park City and Times Square. And I just took an architectural walking tour of Battery Park City on Sunday. And from a urban design perspective, particularly the development south of the World Financial Center, the way they address the street, the way they create public space, I think is wonderful. But from the perspective of equity and diversity, it is a completely unaffordable community, and I don't think terribly diverse. And I guess the question then becomes, how does city planning use the Equitable Development Data Tool and other tools to encourage developers to focus on the sort of urban design issues of, creating inviting, comfortable public spaces when they build buildings, but at the same time, pursue development that is, and I think this is something that is, really pertinent in Upper Manhattan, truly affordable to the residents, who live here, because the projects that come before us, even though they are under various city subsidy programs, I think the example I gave of one in East Harlem and also one in Inwood, if the median income in CB11 and CB12 is around $52,000, The lower end of affordability, I think for each of those projects was something like 75. So you're like $25,000 above the median. So in terms of affordability, they completely miss the mark. So how does this help?
So I would say, from what I understand from your question, it's really thinking about like, how are we using this tool? And I'm sorry, my lighting is like really off right now. How are we using this tool? And it's just really important to remember that this is a disclosure document. It is something that is being used in conjunction with an application. And so what its intent is to really make sure that we understand when we're reviewing applications of what demographics are in the community, what's the data behind, each community. But it's very difficult to say why and how someone is being displaced from their neighborhood. And I think we have had many conversations about, the data that we have. You really need to follow a person and understand what was the reason for them leaving the neighborhood. So the conversation is really like what's happening in one neighborhood in comparison to another neighborhood. And I think really like it's important that we are having those conversations, that our commission is having those conversations. And it should influence, the conversations that are around development in a neighborhood. As this is not an impact statement, so it is not looking to see, it's not able to tell us, and nor do we have really the data, that it's very difficult to find data to be able to say that one development is impacting a neighborhood. It is impacting the area. Just you can't look at it as one project versus one. It's more of a conversation of how things are happening at large. So we really hope that this isn't, this is something to add value to the conversation. It's giving us more information about what's happening, who's in the neighborhood and what's, what is, what kind of, I'm sorry, I'm losing my word right now. But what's kind of the, I can't think of the word I want to use, but it's more of like focusing in on, starting a conversation about who is in the neighborhood, what's happening in the neighborhood, and really being able to use that in our conversations through ULERP.
Vivian? Vivian, you're muted.
How about now?
Good.
All right. I wondered, I can imagine a developer's office trying to get through this and assigning someone to fill out these kinds of papers. And how is there a real educational component in which the actual, head honchos, whatever, are forced to go through something like this and really be, pay attention or understand?
Yes. So we have been holding applicant forums to make sure that not only the development team, but their consultant groups are well aware of how to fill these out, what are expectations on, the things that Olivia kind of presented on. And we're also there available to support, to help in any way. But this is the part of the developer's application. And what they submit is not representative of the agency, but we want to make sure that is written in a way that is easy for communities and for staff to understand, and make sure that it's very clear what the data is saying.
And before we move to the next question, I just wanted to supplement that, in terms of the headhunting situation, the community board, as Laura has mentioned, will have the opportunity to review this racial equity report when it comes as part of the application, and react to the statement, react to the different sections that the report will have, as well as the data. You can also start, doing the analysis on your own if you have any sites in the area. So you are not caught by surprise with different numbers. That's something that we started doing because we had to review this racial equity report, because that's on the applicant side. When we get a land use action or something, we also have to double check against the zoning resolution. So what this tool is going to help us do, as Olivia has mentioned, part of the where we live strategies, how do those responses, how do these numbers align to the strategy for the the city at 2025? We have to compare those, make sure that these all responses are aligned, that we are providing the appropriate what the neighborhood most need. And in terms of also helping us in community board conversations, when sometimes it could go very extra on both sides. The applicant having an expectation of this project bringing all different things in the community, having a different position, but having this data, ensuring that we have a common ground, will help us have those difficult conversations with valid points. And all the point that are in the tool, the Equitable Development Explorer, are actually accurate data. Is that we wanted to add more, because there's a lot more that we could add in the different things, but we wanted to ensure that these are real points that we can validate every 10 years, 5 years, depending on the census, that were like trusted sources, to ensure that we are not having any type of speculation when we move forward. That's the only thing that I wanted to add. And I know there's other questions, other hands raised. So
Yeah, what I think I heard Vivian say is, how is city planning going to ensure that the paperwork analysis reports that are required by the Equitable Development Data Tool, or the racial equity reports, represents the understanding and buy-in of principles of the applicant, and not just the good work of a consultant they hired to get them through the process?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly why we have a team of 5 people at DCP who are always looking at this and working really closely with the borough planner to make sure that the narrative of these reports are accurate to what is being said in the actual Explorer tool. So we will be doing those kind of, as much as we can, fact checks of that, and making sure that the data is accurate, that they're actually presenting in the tool. And what's great is that all of us have access to the exact same tool that they're using to be able to create these reports. So we can all, see it with our own eyes too, of the same data and tool.
Tanya?
Yes. So one of my questions is that, what do you all have any idea what percentage of, it may be a difficult question to answer, but what percentage of possible projects would be covered under this tool? So of the projects that typically come up before you, what percentage would be covered by this? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I don't know. We're still so in the beginning of this. And so we've only had a handful at this point that we've actually had come through, and they were very large projects. So we can definitely come back to you as we continue to collect data of like how many projects we're getting, but we don't, it's not intended to impact, not intended to be something that smaller projects necessarily will be triggered, unless they're, as Olivia had mentioned, in historic districts or some other type of trigger that might bring it on. But yeah, right now it's been very large projects that have used it. But as we get that information, we will certainly be available to give more.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it would just be a good idea to get, some kind of idea of the scope of this and how much of this will be covered. Because if it's like 5%, 10%, you know what I mean, or something like that, but if it's more, I think people will understand that this is something, it's always something important that they need to, that should be a part of the conversation, but people really understand the gravity of it and the stakes, if it's a good percentage of projects that come before. And then I guess the other question is, in terms of doing this particular project, and I know you gave us what will trigger, the requirement to do this report. And I think, I know Vivian even mentioned it, but in terms of making sure that that's clear to the community, like, because even when you put it here in a slide, I was, you start talking about square feet and all that, and I'm like, wait, no, we gotta, and so plain English, and how can we break it down so that communities also understand what they should be looking for when they hear, about some coming projects, whether it's in NIMBY, publications, or wherever people Google, who knows, if people, get the gossip that happens, so that people understand, okay, we understand this project would trigger this. And so we should make sure that we are looking for, and that we are, looking for that conversation with that particular developer about that project.
I think you're absolutely right. And now that we have our team built, we're in the process of like creating all of those kind of supplemental materials that can be really supportive in the conversation. And we've also, with the links that that Olivia shared, there's some videos that we've been putting together, and we're trying to do it in multimedia so that people can either listen to it, they can see it, they can print it. And so that way there's just like a accessibility of it for any way that we can. But I completely agree with you. And that's really our next mission, is getting that off the ground. The Racial Impact Study Impact Coalition, who was our partner in this and building this this tool and helping us figure out, thinking through the data. They are also, we've been working with them to talk about doing trainings together in the communities, to see, like, to joining forces to do trainings together. And I think they were also working with, they're adding CUP, which is Center of Pedagogy, to try to give some extra support on that. It's just making sure that we can get the right resources out there, and working together to make sure people are aware that this is a great advocacy tool that can be part of the conversation.
What is the name? What is the name of the organization you said you're working with? The Racial Equity.
The Racial Impact, I always mix it up, Racial Impact Study Coalition. The coalition is made up of many different nonprofit organizations, and I think there's some community boards participated as well. They were the impetus of creating the actual legislation. So they fought hard to get the legislation into place, Local Law 78. And we've been partnered with them lock and step, and making sure that this tool is really accessible for everyone, and that it's really providing the correct data, and data that's useful for all of us to start conversations around how racial impacts, the displacement racial impact. Is getting so late, I can't think.
Wayne, can I ask one more thing? That's it, I promise. Something came. Okay. So I understand this is the beginning of a conversation, right? And I think I heard Wayne mention some of this too earlier, possibly, or somewhat allude to this about how, okay, we know these issues are very important, and with these projects, it can really impact our communities. But this is not binding, right? So if we find that this will have a negative impact, and the particular criteria that's being evaluated as part of the tool, what could be the potential challenges of or I don't even say enforcing, because it's not really enforcing, or ensuring that corrections or changes are made, or that if, let's say, the community demands, okay, we saw this report and this is going to have an impact on our community, we demand this project stop, or we demand, so where does this fit in terms of where there could be accountability built in once, it's part, whatever comes out of the analysis of those reports?
Yeah, I mean, the legislation was written to be a disclosure document. So it is not something that's about necessarily that we need approval of this document to move forward through the ULURP process. So yes, that is correct. But what it does do is arm all of us with correct information to be able to talk about in our public hearings, to talk about amongst your committees, to be brought up to the city planning commission, to be brought up to city council. So it's really just adding value and of information into those, existing structure of the public hearings.
So just to go back to Tanya's question or point, I think it's something that city planning may want to think about a bit more and come back and say how it's going to be addressed. But it reminds me of an article last week, I don't recall if it was Cranes or whatever, where I think it was the Pinnacle group, had a rather large fine levied against them because in one of their corporate condo conversions, they did not disclose the condition, I believe, of certain plumbing or gas piping. And if it's gas, it's still plumbing. And like in an offering plan, you don't have to say there's a plan for addressing a situation, but you do have to say, you have to disclose everything that's material about the building that you're basically selling. So, if I own a building and I want to convert it to a co-op, all the systems could be in terrible condition. I can say that's the case. And if you want to buy it, up to you. There's nothing that requires me to say, I'm going to undertake, repairs as the sponsor, or I'm going to put money aside so you can do it. And so I guess the concern is that while this sounds like a worthwhile tool to have, material conversations, at the end of the day, if we can check the data and the data objectively shows that they're going to have, adverse impacts, that it's not going to align with city planning's, goals and objectives for planning development in the area, is city planning going to, based on the authority it has, take that into consideration and not approve a project or require the applicant to address the things that do not align with the city goal? Or is it going to say that you're required to disclose it, you've disclosed it, and now we're moving on?
I think I'm with you. And I'm looking for that, tool to be able to figure that out. But the tool doesn't tell you that a one project is going to make an adverse impact. What it is doing is disclosing what are the rents in the neighborhood, what are the, health indicators in the neighborhood, what are the demographics of the neighborhood. So it's not that we can link necessarily that this one project is going to provide adverse impacts. It is saying, what is this project providing in consideration of what's happening, the demographics of the community.
I understand that. That's why I said, you mentioned it brings value. It allows us to have informed, more in-depth conversations. And if coming out of those conversations, there is no disagreement that, locating, this bus depot, in the neighborhood based upon, 30 to 50 years of experience is going to increase the rates of asthma or whatever, in the area, or if the density of a proposed development, based upon the information we already have on, overcrowding at certain peak hours at a subway station or bus service, that it's going to add to that. So, we've had the conversations, we've looked at the data that's readily available, which is a lot. Coming out of that, is city planning going to say, you need to do something to address these things that we've discussed and verified?
So I think that would, so just for that example, let's say like in the environmental review impact would show that. And so what this is doing is complementing the environmental review in this instance, of saying, this is kind of what the racial equity report is showing us. This is what the environmental review is showing us. And then there's a conversation there. But the racial impact report won't be able to say the bus depot is going to provide more asthma related incidences through the racial equity report, because it's just data disclosing like who's in the neighborhood, what is, what's happening there. So it would be a combination of these, and that's part of the storytelling, is like this racial equity report is starting to tell the story of like what's happening and who's in the neighborhood, how are people moving in and out of this neighborhood in comparison to other neighborhoods. And then, depending on what type of environmental impact statement is required through the application, if there is one, there's conversations of that can be used.
I don't want to belabor it, because I think I also saw a hand of an attendee, although it's come down and we have a few other things. But I would say from my perspective, and maybe other committee members might echo that. I think having the equitable development data tool and the racial equity reports it's a worthwhile effort, but it needs to not feel, but actually be more meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Of the folks who participate in that process need to feel that participation went somewhere, and had an impact, that it was not just a matter of, as sometimes we do feel, that there's a process that some law, rule, or requirement says a project has to go through, and so we went through it to check a box. But in terms of everything that we said, everything that might have been agreed to verbally, although we don't have the ability to enforce it, although the city council and others do, that at the end of the day, that was all for naught. I do see a hand from Carla Fisk. Carla, you should be able to speak now.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, DCP, for all of your really excellent work on this, and it's very impressive. And I've been commenting through the Q&A box. I just want to say this, this won't prevent displacement in and of itself. Developers will view it as another box to check, and they will put their spin on it with their very highly paid comms people to make themselves look as good as they can. But this tool that DCP, and I think is it HPD also?
Yes.
Designed together along with members of the Racial Impact Study Coalition, is actually it pulls on trusted sources of data. I'm not a data scientist. I'd love to have DCP explain that in more detail if they haven't already. But it gives regular people access to information they've never had access to before about their neighborhoods. And it's not plug and play, unfortunately. It takes, even though I know everybody's done their best to make it as easy as possible to use, but risk and working with CUP, which is the pedagogy project, are developing additional tools, and also DCP is developing tools to create more transparency and to make it easier to use. So local community advocacy groups can use it, and they've got access to information. We'll have access to information we never had before. It's not perfect, but it's really great. So thank you again, DCP.
Thank you, Carla. Anything else on this agenda item? If not, I will say, thank you to the DCP team. I want to say that we would certainly appreciate, as this rolls out, having some further conversations. The questions that we asked before about what percentage of projects going through it, we'd like to get a sense of, what you're seeing in terms of that percentage. And also the questions, that we're raising about, how can we, ensure that we, community boards, community residents, get the most out of this.
Yeah, well, we're, continuously working on this, and don't see this as, we finished the tool and it's a check mark, we're done. That's not where our heads are at. And we constantly want to try to find ways to improve on it. As more data comes available, we'll make sure to add to it. And, as Carla mentioned, this is the first time that we have all of this data in one place. It has been that you had to go to DOHMH to get some of the data, or you had to go to HPD, and now we have it all in one place, which is really, really remarkable. So I would say, keep telling us what's frustrating about it. And we're consistently wanting to make sure that we're, making sure the tool is working to help you have conversations, and that it's, if there's things that don't make sense, let us know. We want to make sure that it's really accessible to everyone. So I really appreciate you inviting us today. I don't know if Olivia, if you wanted to say anything else, but for sure, please send emails to us and let us know. And as you get projects, Olivia, Jose, and myself can be here to kind of help you look at those RERs and making sure that that you're able to use it in the, understand what it looks like and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an evolving process. We know that the triggers can be overwhelming and complex, but please reach out if you all have any questions. We're here to listen to feedback and work with you all to develop this tool.
I answered some questions in the chat, but I wanted to paste it for everyone. Pasted a data dictionary. I know there was a question about what type of data we're using or so. So there, I linked the data dictionary, which is also within the tool, so you guys can, look around, play around with that as well. And then there was another question about when does this gets triggered for the applicants, and that is a filing before certification, when the applicant is ready to actually file a land use application, when you will get a notice of certification from the from DCP at the community board. That's when this needs to be completed by the applicant and refer out to the community board. And just last to close out, I know Wayne, you had that question in terms of like how much important we're giving to this, and I think it's fair to say that a commission as well as the department takes every application very seriously, and every single recommendation from the community board. We value your time. When you guys meet, extend the recommendations, as well as the board of president. We evaluate those responses, and this will give more, power essentially to the people, as I said, to have more informed recommendations that the commission can evaluate. So I don't want to promise and say DCP will, if this doesn't meet the goals from the Where We Live report, then we're going to dismiss the application. But I think it will give us another leg for working with the applicants in negotiations, or shaping projects in the best way that is fair for everyone. So that's the only thing that I want to do.
And I would say too, if you want to look at the last couple of CPCs, that the commission has talked about the racial equity reports pretty consistently, and debated the conversation in that. So I'd recommend that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Our next item on the agenda is a presentation by Representative of the United Palace on its proposed new illuminated digital signing project. And just for reference of the land use committee members who were around years ago, and for our new members, the United Palace is a individually landmarked building, and Community Board 12 supported its landmark designation. Mike Fiddleson, the floor, or the screen as the case may be, is yours.
I'll take whatever you give me. Good evening. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Of course, now my phone is ringing. I'm going to do my best here to share screen and get the right screen up here. Does that look right to everyone?
Yes.
Terrific. As Wayne mentioned, I'm with the United Palace, which has been on the corner of 175th Street and Broadway since 1930. It is a spectacular building. Just judged on the lineup tonight, I know a lot of folks are familiar with it, have been inside. We're going to talk about a project tonight that's happening on the outside, which will require approval from Landmarks. And we have been in discussions with Landmarks to sort of tee up the project the way that makes sense to hopefully the community board and the Landmarks Commission, which I think at this point we are scheduled to be in front of on the 27th. Remind me, general CB12 general meetings are on Tuesdays?
They're typically on Tuesdays, but October got a little messed up because of the Jewish holiday. So you should check online to see when the general meeting is. Typically the fourth Tuesday. I know last month we did not meet on Tuesday to avoid a conflict, and I'm not certain if this month if we're meeting on Tuesday or not.
Right. We're meeting on Tuesday, the 25th.
Tuesday, 25th. Thank you. I believe that our meeting with the commission is the following day,
Which is kind of tight.
But you know, they meet several times a year. We can always move it to a different date if there are things that we need to fix and get right.
Yeah, well, it's not even a matter of things to fix, but you know, if this were an absolute emergency where something was happening before the general meeting, we might refer it to the executive committee to pass so they could send a resolution. But you know, if we could get it to go through the normal process, because then the general meeting, it would still need to be ratified. So if at the general meeting a resolution will be considered, it can be kind of tight for the staff to turn around, you know, from 10 o'clock the night before when we approve something and get it to LPC by 10 or 11 o'clock the next morning. So if they could consider this at their November meeting, I think they meet twice a month, that would give us some time not to be quite so rushed.
Understood. And thinking off the top of my head right now, I believe that my practice run with the commission is the following day, but it is the beginning of November when the actual commission meeting is.
Okay, that's so much better.
I think we have breathing room here. We've been looking at this project for a number of months, spent the summer sussing it out, and let me run it by you and see where we're at. So basic background, United Palace is a 92-year-old building, opened as one of the Lowe's Wonder Theaters back in 1930. It served as a deluxe movie theater until 1969, when a spiritual organization purchased it. At the time, it was headed by Reverend Ike, a great televangelist, brought a lot of people in, brought a lot of attention to it. The congregation has petered out over the years, and it is still a spiritual organization, still has spiritual programming, but it has also more and more taken up the need for entertainment, theater, arts in the community. What we have is 20 attraction boxes around the building that have been there since the beginning. We are talking about converting 6 of those poster boxes into digital display signs. By doing that, the benefit to the United Palace will be saving money on printing costs, providing more flexibility in changing out a message. Very easy to get a digital image up instead of having to print something, saving time on creating marketing materials, and overall a more attractive presentation to passers-by. We find that a lot of folks send us posters that are the wrong size. They don't have a standardized format, look, branding. This will allow us to bring all of that in-house and make a very clean presentation.
How many existing display boxes did you say there were?
20.
Okay.
And we'll look and see exactly where they are as we go through the presentations.
All right, so we're not talking about the marquee.
No, that's not a poster box.
No.
We're not talking about the marquee. We're talking about eye level.
Okay.
I think most folks know this. The United Palace takes up a full city block between 176th and what was 175th Street, between Broadway and Wadsworth Avenue. And we'll be talking about this corner at ground level, the corner of Broadway and 175th Street, which is also La Plaza de las Americas. The precedent, and what got me thinking about this, was in the spring, I was down taking my kids to the dentist downtown somewhere, and we happened to go past Radio City Music Hall, and I saw how they had taken their attraction boxes and put flat screen TVs in them, and then built out around them with plywood and duvetine cover to make a very nice attraction. Radio City Music Hall is a little bit younger than us. I don't know why anyone is calling me this late at night. My apologies for that. But I thought that this was a very elegant solution compared to what we'd always thought we would need to do, is build a custom size display box in the poster boxes. This is a better ratio, a better design aspect, much easier to install and maintain for us. So that's, I originally saw it at Radio City Music Hall and went around, and there are, of course, several churches around town, landmarked buildings that have created a precedent to putting digital signage outside their spaces. So we kind of feel like there is a path forward for doing this, both from a spiritual center standpoint and as a theater. So existing conditions, these are the four sides of the building. Broadway has 1, 2, 3, 4 attraction boxes. 175th Street, aka the Plaza, has 1, 2, 3, 4 as well. Wadsworth Avenue on the east side of the building has an entire wall of boxes, and 176th Street also has boxes. And this gives you an idea of what they look like from a street standpoint. These are 2 in the Plaza. The 2 in the Plaza and the 6 along Wadsworth, we've been using to display the artwork of a local artist, Andrea Arroyo. I believe our next, and this has been up since May or June, the next exhibit that we're talking about using those spaces for would be NOMA has a new show. We converted part of the gallery and part of the annex into a gallery space on the ground floor. A community art gallery, which those of you who know me, I've talked about for about 20 years. NOMA is working with Uptown Collective, aka Lead Black, to do an Instagram exhibit beginning in October. And based on what we see from that show, we'll probably use these display boxes to put up old school posters that advertise the artwork that is in the show. And then 176th Street, which is our load-in doors, also has attraction boxes that we have used for just examples of activities that happen in the theater. There's a photograph of Lenny Kravitz. There's one of Romeo Santos. There's one of the Dominican Day Parade kickoff with the Diablos dancing in the foyer. This proposal, however, is limited to just 6 of those boxes. The others are going to remain as is. They are 2 next to each other on Broadway. These 2 skinnier poster boxes that flank the doors on Broadway. And then the first 2 boxes on the Plaza side, 175th Street, the south side of the building. These are the 6 boxes that we would like to convert to digital display. An example of what they look like now, they have not been maintained, they have not been kept up over the years. There's a plexiglass door that opens on each one of these, and this gives you an idea of what the conditions are inside. At some point in time, I couldn't even tell you when, we did put LED strips encircling the boxes so you could see the posters when it's dark or at night. But it just doesn't give a clean, professional look to what was happening inside, what the theater, what the space is all about. So we really need to, come up with a solution to clean this up, make it look better, and just present all of our activities in a much better light, so to speak. So the actual proposal, what we're talking about doing here, is taking the 2 boxes on Broadway to the farthest left, to the left of the entryway that are next to each other, and installing 65-inch flat screen TVs in each one of them. Since these boxes are directly next to each other and right next to the entryway to the second floor of the annex, which is where NOMA hosts a lot of art activities and a lot of community arts groups use the space up there. Once we install this TV, that will be devoted to NOMA's use. Whatever programs they're offering, whatever's happening in the gallery at that time. If there's particular groups that are having extended programming on the floor. For instance, Statement Arts comes in and does a theater camp for kids for 4 weeks every summer. Devote that attraction box just to NOMA programming. The one next to it, which we call box B, this being box A, this being box B, would be utilized for upcoming activities, programs happening at the United Palace itself. Both of those would be 65-inch screens. Over around on the plaza side, the boxes are a little bit bigger. They can accommodate larger screens. We're proposing putting in 75-inch monitors there. And again, they would be featuring activities that are happening inside the United Palace, upcoming events, that sort of thing. The other two boxes, these are boxes C and D, the ones that directly flank the main doors underneath the marquee. They're skinnier than all of the other boxes. There's no flat screen TV that fits in there comfortably without wasting a lot of space on the top and bottom. So we have a different solution here. We would like to install customized illuminated boxes that would be cut to fit the space, and then we would have a Durafilm attached to it that's static. It doesn't change, and that on the film would be printed a short history of the United Palace, of what's happening, and a QR code at the bottom that would take you directly to the upcoming event page on the website. We have two boxes, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left would be in English. The one on the right would be in Spanish. And again, these are static, unchanging messages about the history of the United Palace and upcoming activities. The technology that we've sourced to make this work is Samsung's flat screen TVs, monitors, whatever the kids call them these days. In this image, they're horizontal, but they do flip vertically and will display images vertically. Both of them are programmable to be dimmable, so we can adjust the amount of lumens that are being projected through them. And these two would be on the Broadway side next to each other, boxes A and B. These two would be on the Plaza side, which are boxes E and F. These are the thin profile light boxes from the company DSA Signage that would be custom fit into the attraction boxes to the left and right, which are skinnier. And again, these would just have a printed Duratran on them that would be unchanging. So at the end of the day, it would look something like this, where boxes A and B have the Samsung flat screens over here. One's devoted to NOMA, one has upcoming United Palace activities. These are the two static images that flank the doors, this one in English, this one in Spanish, talking about the history of the United Palace. And then there would be two of the larger screens on the Plaza side, both 75 inches. We think all in, the project is going to cost about $12,000. At least that's what the estimates looked like a few months ago when we started working on this. We can do most of the labor in-house. We have a house electrician. We have a house maintenance team that can do the carpentry. We already know that there's pathways for the electrical to get to each one of the boxes. So we know we can get electrical there, and the digital cable line that would run from the computer that generates the imagery can follow the same path as the electrical line. Need to pick up a couple of more things. We want to get better weatherproof plexiglass for the covers, and perhaps a pretty good lock on them to make sure our flat screen TVs don't walk out in the middle of the night. But all in all, we think it's a rather straightforward project from the tech end. Any questions?
Just a quick observation. You mentioned the example of Radio City. If you went downtown from the United Palace, but not so far downtown, like just to 125th Street, I believe the Apollo Theater, which is also an individual landmark, did something very similar decades ago. So that's a good model. And on the same block with the Apollo Theater, the former Victoria Theater, which is not landmark, was National Register eligible, is being redeveloped as a multi-purpose project, and I had something to do with that while I was still at a prior job. There again, SHPO required certain historic preservation elements, and so I believe there again, what used to be the one or two display boxes will be digital, as will, I believe, the marquee. And I believe, the Apollo also digitized their marquee. So there are examples if you wanted to take a look at it, the team wanted to take a look at and cite and compare, for, the LPC presentation, in CB10 that are really good models.
It's a good point. Yeah.
Steve? Steve, you're muted.
Who did that? Mike, this looks like a no-brainer. I'm just concerned about the security of the flat screen TVs and whether or not the cover, or is it you said plexiglass? Is that shatterproof or unbreakable, perhaps? And so how can you speak a little more about how secure it's going to be, and whether the plexiglass is shatterproof or unbreakable?
Good question. We have some concerns about the security, but we also know at the end of the day, if somebody wants to get something, they're going to get it, right? The plexiglass is shatterproof. The locking mechanisms that we're looking at will be robust enough that somebody's going to need to spend some time getting through it to get in there. We do have, I think I'm still displaying here, we do have security cameras up here, which will be able to keep an eye on this and at least see anybody who's walking down the street with a flat screen TV under their arm. But, it is a risk. It is a risk at the end of the day that if somebody really wants it, they're going to find getting it. And you triggered a memory of mine, Steve. And I'm sure, folks here remember there was a time when the United Palace really did have a fear in this community of what might happen to it by the community. And there was a metal fence that completely encircled the building as one way of protecting it and making sure it kept people out. But I think too much that approach to the community has gone too far in keeping people out. And we are trying to develop, for lack of a better word, a more open presentation and better welcoming arms to have more folks come inside. So to some degree, we're willing to sacrifice, somebody walking off with $1,000 TV rather than, start with arms out saying, we don't really want you to come in here and know what's going on inside. Does that make any sense?
Sure, but and one more question. Apart from the QR device, will these boxes still advertise current and future attractions? They will. Isn't that what you said? They will.
Yes,
they will still advertise current and future attractions inside the theater.
Right, upcoming events, programs, activities.
Right.
It's been nice, and I'm not sure if anyone has noticed, but there's been more activity in the plaza and more interest in having activity in the plaza in the last few months. The Bindle Stiff Circus has been up 3 or 4 times since the summer. I would think that at least this particular box might be able to also spend some time advertising upcoming events in the plaza. And I repeat this to everybody I see, not that we want to take over the plaza. We have enough real estate to deal with already. We do not want to own the plaza, but continuing to help the community understand what's happening there and how it can be a community resource is an activity we're very much invested in.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Steve, chicken soup.
Yeah.
Tanya.
Yes, thank you. Mike?
Hey, Tanya.
Hi, how are you? Yes, so I had a question. Again, I don't know if this is possible, but I'm just thinking, since this is something that to me is a good idea, is needed, and will be a fixture, permanent fixture, you know, of your facility there. Is there any thought about integration of, for those who might be visually impaired, being a part of the display, where there's a way that they could see, get this information that's being visually displayed, because it's digital, so maybe there's ways to integrate it. I don't know how that would work, so please. But is there, considering that, you know, is there a way to integrate that into the design?
That's a fascinating question. I have absolutely no idea. Digital display screens are, you know, by definition visual. I don't know what an auditory, you know, unless there was some way of hooking up you know, here we go. I'm with you, Tanya. Thinking out loud here. You know, there could be a way where there could be a QR code somewhere that you could download a recorded message that
yes,
was happening. You know, there would still need to be a visual element. And I just don't know how the technology works there or how the human behavior works there. But the only way it's going to work is if there's an auditory, maybe it's even a call this number to hear a listing of upcoming events kind of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, I just think it would be make it a little bit more sweet. And since it's permanent, it thinks about that element of access, you know, disability access into the future.
And just for reference, Mike, I heard Tanya ask about the visually impaired, not the hearing impaired. And so my thought is there is existing technology that's used on websites for the visually impaired. And I guess the question for the tech team working on this, is there some way of incorporating that into the display screen? So if someone is visually impaired, can they, you know, touch something and for a certain period of time, the screen adjusts? For the hearing impaired, you know, the same way that you've had traffic lights and you hear the little voice, or if there's some, you know, signal or whatever that pings to a smartphone, that will allow them to pick up the story. But I think it's an interesting question, and I'm sure that, you know, DSA signage, as well as the folks at Samsung, you know, probably know a lot more about what's possible than we do.
That's interesting.
Back to you, Steve. Or is that an old hand?
Well, Steve Simon is an old hand, right?
Yes. There are a couple of questions in the Q&A. Wade, have you seen them from?
Well, no, Steve, because it's kind of difficult for me to run the meeting and other things and take minutes. Why don't you read them for us?
Thank you, Wayne. I think I'll do that. So Denise Caniff asks, love the idea of digital signage for the United Palace. It makes sense for all the reasons you described. A few questions. Do you know what level of lighting / lumens is optimal so there is no negative impact on pedestrian and motor traffic?
It's a good question. And my answer is I know that the signage, you can adjust the lumens that come out of the signs themselves. And I would expect that somewhere at DOT, somebody has a recommended lumen allotment that we will be
Required.
right.
All right, so are we saying that you're going to check with DOT?
Correct. Yes, I will determine the optimal lumen output via DOT.
Okay, hopefully that is a satisfactory answer for Denise. Our next question, do you think you'll want to convert other boxes later on after you see how these 6 digital boxes work?
I don't know. That's an honest answer. I don't know. At some point, it's a lot of expense with very little payoff. If you have, you looked around the 14 remaining boxes. Now, I could certainly imagine each one has a different digital display of artwork, and then it would be a lot easier to display the artwork of a lot more artists. The build out for all of those would be much greater. There is no electrical runs to any of those. None of them already have a frame in place for a door. At least a couple of them do, but most of them don't. It is not something that we've spent any time thinking about at this point.
All right, let me ask a somewhat associated question. The entrance to the gallery, and it's wonderful that you've been able to set aside space in the building for the NOMA gallery. The entrance is over, am I correct, on the corner at 176th Street?
One end, well, there's several. There's an entrance right here, and then yeah, there's the corner entrance over here. There's another one in the middle of the Broadway. So there's actually there's 4 different entrances to the gallery.
Oh, but is there a main entrance for that visitors are supposed to use?
It's really going to depend on what staffing is that day and how many people are coming in.
All right, so my point is that when I was there recently, maybe it was for the closing party for the art stroll. I don't think there was a sign on the exterior of the building that indicated that there was a gallery inside. And I think that's an element that's missing.
Yeah.
I would encourage you to figure out a way to add some signage to the outside, letting people know that we actually have a gallery inside the building.
Well, I can't speak for NOMA, but my hope would be that they would devote this sign in part to what's happening in the gallery. And as it rotated through its, X number of images, it would keep coming back to gallery inside, the hours are blah, 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 come on in, smile as you pass or come on in.
Yeah, I was going to say, if one of the digital display boxes is going to be devoted to NOMA, they have, an excellent opportunity to use that to basically let you know they're there, that they have a gallery and what's going on inside. I mean, that's the whole purpose of having, that digital display box.
Yeah. Well, it's still a little unclear as to which entrance you go into or whatever.
Yeah, but those are 2 different issues, Steve.
Okay.
And the thing to be also mindful of is that type of usage. And I think city planning comes into this a little bit, because you can't use those to advertise Coca-Cola or McDonald's. They have to be related to what's going on in the building or events. So, that would be a perfectly consistent and reasonable use of that sign to say that, NOMA's inside, NOMA has a gallery, and they're doing the Cuba photos of Wayne Benjamin.
Steve, one more response to your question that I've had a second to think about it. And you can't see it here. It is confusing because there's many different entrances to the United Palace, particularly when you want to go to the United Palace or you want to go to NOMA. We do, and I don't see it in this picture, we do have some stanchions with sign tops that have arrows on them indicating what entrance you should use for that day, for that time. One is for the United Palace and one is for NOMA. We probably didn't have them up for the gallery evening because folks started off by coming into the main entrance, and then they did the the stroll around the building and then entered from another way. But most days when you come, you would find a NOMA sign next to a United Palace sign on 176th Street, where from day to day, that's where most of our entrance is. So we can cut down a number of staff that we have sitting at doors.
Yeah, maybe there could just be a sign on the door. It just says the NOMA Gallery, whatever. Let people know it's right there. That's my suggestion.
I'll write it down.
Is there any further question? And if there is not, so this is an item that requires a resolution. There's a proposal going to landmarks for the conversion of, 6 existing display boxes. There's another term that was used for them, but I mean, these are the posted display boxes to a digital format. Is there a motion in support of the proposal?
Yeah, so moved.
Second.
Okay, so just for reference of new members and any attendees at the committee level, and maybe you can stop sharing now,
Sorry,
Mike, so I can see the attendees list as well. At the committee level, everyone can vote. So we first take the vote of the committee. If there are other board members present, I think Bruce Robertson was with us, may still be. Other committee members can vote, and members of the public can also, if they wish, vote on the project. And so there is a motion on the floor in support of the digital display box project, which has to go before land use. I'm first taking votes from the community members, of which there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those in favor, say aye or raise your hand digitally.
Aye.
Any opposed for the committee? Any abstaining? Steve, take your hand down.
Oh.
Okay, so that's carried. I do not see Bruce Robertson anymore. So I will now go to members of the public. If you would like to vote in favor, please raise your hand. I see 2 hands. Kimberly, you're not a member of the public, you're the committee. Are there any members of the public who are, okay, so Carla and Dave, if you can take your hands down. Are there other members of the public who are opposed? Abstaining? Okay, there we have it. Thank you so much, Mike.
thank you, everyone. See you at the end of the month.
Yeah, and I was going to say, as you know, that at the general meeting, because you've gone through this before, anyone can sign up for 2 or 3 minutes, whatever the time frame is, to speak during public session. And in many instances, when there are resolutions to be voted on by the full board, representatives of the organization involved come and give a quick overview and ask for everyone's support. So I'm sure that you or other members of United Palace would want to do that.
I'm very disappointed, Mike, that you're not wearing one of your snazzy iridescent sport jackets.
You don't like the shirt?
That shirt is good, but it doesn't quite compensate for the lack of the iridescent sport jacket.
I'm opposed to Mike Middleton's shirt. I think it's outrageous.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, we don't even see Steve Simon. So Steve, when you turn on your camera and we see your jacket and shirt, then we can talk, okay?
All right, I will wear a famous jacket to the full board meeting if Steve, that guarantees a vote in favor.
Yeah, I think we merit that.
Please don't wear a tie with that shirt. That's all I ask.
Fair enough.
You can wear a striped bow tie.
Yes. And I'll make it work too.
Yeah, spin around or something. So thank you so much. So, the next item on the agenda was going to be a discussion of our, planning and zoning priorities with the Office of Councilman Sean Abreu. Sort of following my emails, Amber Moore from his office points out that he actually was on earlier and had to leave. And she's no longer with us. My assumption is that Amber, as his chief of staff, was going to be the person we were speaking with, but apparently the councilman was coming in person. So we do not have a speaker for that fifth item, and I emailed to see that I guess we need to reschedule, and since it's rescheduled from October, they can be first on the agenda, so we don't miss it, or find out what the availability is, because I had no idea that he was coming personally at what time.
But Wayne, we still have to vote on our own committee's budget requests.
Well, I was talking about what is on the agenda for the next item, and simply letting everyone know that, because we've been waiting for some time to have this conversation. We had a very long conversation with Carmen De La Rosa, and been waiting for the opportunity to have the conversation with Sean Abreu. So I'm just letting everyone know that there was follow-up, and that he was on the agenda, and that he in person was going to attend, but until literally the meeting began, it was coming to, there was no indication that he was coming, and that I guess he could only stay for the beginning of it. And as far as land use goes, we're coming up to our second hour, or the end of our second hour, so it's a longer meeting than normal. So moving on, I have not, one of the things that is on our meaning the community board's list of to-dos for this month is the budget priorities. And that's, the capital and operating budget priorities. And for the last couple of years, land use had, just one in each. The one for expense pertain to city planning. I think last year we changed it from hiring, because it was pointed out that they really could not commit to more staff hires, but allocating more planning staff to work with Community Board 12 and local residents on planning initiatives that are sort of originated by us, that are community-based planning. And we pointed out that, in the response they gave years ago, where they looked at the inward rezoning, that was an initiative, of, EDC. It was not an initiative of the community board, the land use committee, or, community residents. So, that is something that we've carried for a number of years. And we probably want to keep it as, continuing support. We need to take a look at, and frankly, I didn't have time today to look at, what the last response was. The second, the capital request said that the city should identify, city-owned sites, infill sites, to package them in one or more development RFPs to allocate, city resources. That would be, capital subsidies, abatements, with those RSPs to promote affordable housing. And I believe last year, we specified why affordable housing would mean housing that is affordable at the AMI levels that make sense in Community District 12. And, that is something I think we also want to support. I will also say that I had a conversation with Mark Levine's sort of land use team, and they shared a couple of sites that they were looking at and wanted to know what the committee thought about it. But the other thing on the table is if there are sites that we as committee members or residents know of that they would like the Manhattan Borough President's Office to look at, to have conversations with, HPD or private owners about the development potential, they would like us to bring those to their attention. So I think somewhere in there, the idea of the city, packaging sites that, and I think we refer to infill sites because some of them are not large, but every site that can be developed to bring more housing is worthwhile, is something we probably still want to support. But the idea of having the Borough President's Office spearhead an effort to also bring privately owned sites as well as public owned sites into the mix is something that we need to think about. How do we, make that among our priorities? Steve.
Well, picking up on what you just mentioned in terms of asking the Borough President's Office to look into privately owned sites, I would suggest that we recommend to them that they look into the Katsumatidi site.
I already did.
Very good. Between which, and we did a resolution on that some time ago. Between St. Nicholas and Amsterdam Avenues, 162nd to 163rd Street. I think that's a prime parcel that should not just sit abandoned the way it has been for years. I do recommend that we show our support once again for those two budget requests that we ask that they be ranked by the full board. I have one minor suggestion with respect to the capital item, that we not use the phrase area median income because that really is a specific term of art that deals with the median income of the entire metropolitan area, that we just refer to the median income of the residents of Washington Heights and Inwood.
And if you would do a great favor and email the entire committee the existing language with your edits, this way, we can have it.
All right.
Not at this very minute.
Oh,
My
good.
point, I think we can, vote in principle to, support or to continue to support and tweak as may be necessary the operating budget and capital budget priorities that we supported last year. And to add to that, as we said, what was brought to my attention and I brought to your attention from the Borough President's Office to see the extent to which the offices of city government and the borough can bring in private sites. And we can clean up the language and send that into the office in advance of the public hearing so they have the language we want them to use.
Sure enough.
Other comments, committee members? If there are no comments, is there a motion to support what Steve and I just discussed?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Tanya, this is getting to be a tradition.
Casablanca, this is the beginning of a beautiful relationship.
Yeah.
Those committee members in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstaining? Everyone, actually, everyone take down your hands. Committee members opposed or abstaining? Once again, any members of the public who would like to vote? In favor? Opposed? Or abstaining? Okay. Thank you so much. Is there any old business?
Wayne, never mind. Someone has, Tom has some new business items
Well,
in the Q&A.
I'm going to get to new business.
Oh, okay, no problem. When you're there, just wanted to let you know.
Yeah. So if there's no old business, I will go to new business. Dave, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yes, I think I did. If you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just wanted to bring up 3 things that might be on your radar for next month or later that apparently have been going on that could end up involving the committee. The first is that the former car wash next to the Inwood Library is up for sale. So that we'll see what happens there. That was, as you remember, purchased and development work was done. Some pre-development work apparently, but we'll see if it is sold, if there's a new owner, if they end up doing something as of right or not, but that's of note. Second is that I've learned that Azimuth, which is the developer that owns the 49-year lease on the Seventh-day Adventist property that was formerly Northeastern Academy, and most of which is currently leased to Amber Charter School, they are going to be planning construction for the former Hearst Mansion in the springtime. And in about a month or so, we'll reveal to the committee what their intentions are. It's not known at this time whether, again, it'll be something as of right, or whether there will be some action involved, whether it's BSA or rezoning or whatnot. So just keep that on your radar. And then third, and probably most critically, the Cumming Street application for the former Holy Trinity site that is now owned by a developer who purchased the site from them. They are coming back to the BSA on November 14th. As you recall, they've twice appeared before the BSA asking for both a height variance from the R7A zoning and asking for a parking variance to have no parking, both of which the board, to paraphrase, told them that they were asking for something that was not justifiable or beyond what the scope of really a variance would be, and to come back to the board with something different. They have until October 25th to submit it. It may be that by the time it's submitted and obtained through the way that the city releases information, I don't know if it'll be available in time for your November meeting or not, but it would be a shame if that went back to the Board of Standards and Appeals without any feedback from the community board. It certainly won't be in time for the general meeting.
It's going to the BSA on November 14th?
It's scheduled for the BSA on their November 14th, 15th calendar. It could be on either of those days, but it's currently scheduled for those days. And their deadline to submit is the 25th.
Okay.
So
well, we can certainly let the office staff know, or I think we might have a contact person at BSA and just let them know that we would appreciate getting the resubmitted application or the responses, because they have copied, I won't say us, I believe they've copied the office each time there was a resubmission. So someone in the office, should be able to get a copy of or get notice of when it is resubmitted, and just make sure that we, the community board land use committee, gets it, because if it's on the 25th, which happens to be the day of the general meeting, we won't be meeting until like the first Wednesday of November, which gives us at least a week or so to review it, tee it up.
Yep, so I just wanted to make you aware.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Vivian?
I wanted to bring up that it's been a year since the American Academy of Arts and Letters came to present the changes that they want to make to their end of the terrace. And then 3 weeks after that meeting, our meeting, about 40 of us met with them to talk about the community's concern for the obstruction of light and a sort of attitude toward the community that came through, an architectural attitude, put it that way. And we were told that they were going to come back and talk to us. It's been a year. It's a very long time to get nothing from them. And I want to, at least from my point of view, I think we should have them come back and talk to us all about what changes they've made to a design that many people in this neighborhood were not in favor of.
Yeah, well, I mean, they said that they would come back to us. There was no time frame, and presumably the last time I had contact with them about the project, which at this juncture was more than half a year ago, they were, looking at their design options. So it strikes me that, we want them to come back to us when they have something new to propose that represents how they would like to proceed, not just to have them come back to us because we think it's been too long. And they may have decided they don't want to do it now. So, I mean,
there's great concern among residents around here that that's not the case. So rather than argue that, I would like to ask on behalf of a lot of people who live at our end of the neighborhood to have them come back.
Steve?
Oh, I mean, what if they don't have anything to report?
But Steve, that's kind of what I just said. So.
I know. I'm agreeing with you.
So
I know, for example,
because I've heard a lot about this coming from too many different directions, and I don't like confusion. But I can certainly reach out again and say that we had the presentation at the community board. At the community board, we recommended that the applicant have a meeting and conversation with residents. We then had a follow-up, not a meeting, but follow-up correspondence where they were digesting and looking at options. And where are they? Are they in a position to come back to us in November or December or at the beginning of the year, so that we can just keep the lines of communication open.
I do know from one of the residents that they ran into Cody Upton on the street and they said, oh yeah, we're changing this to become that. So if they've gone so far as to do that, there's obviously something to talk about.
No, we understand that, but the point is, and I'm looking at this from the perspective of a completely different institution. In some cases, until the board has blessed something, the staff is not authorized to represent that's where the institution is going. So as I said, we can, re-engage. I actually was in touch, with Cody and others recently. I think Liz, actually you don't attend the general meetings, but there was a recent meeting with the Commissioner of Cultural Affairs, which was held by the Hispanic Society and the Academy of Arts and Letters, hosting. And, in that context, there've been a number of conversations, with Cody representing the, Academy of Arts. So it's not that I haven't seen him in forever. So I will re-engage and, not antagonize. I will re-engage to say that we're interested and would like to know where they are and when they're available to come and give us a briefing. Tanya.
Yes. now you will tell me if this is something that we could do, but as you know, in November of 2018, voters, there was some changes to the community boards, obviously, but one was the creation of the CEC that was supposed to do
acronyms, CEC.
yeah, and that's what hold on, I'm sorry, I was trying to get ready. Tell you what it stands for. Let me just at live here while I'm looking up what it actually officially stands for. But there was as supposed to be created as a city agency that's appointed, right? They're appointed by the mayor, and they are supposed to, part of their job is to offer support to the community boards.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And one of which is the area of land use, blah, 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 right? So I guess what I'm asking your opinion of whether you think it's a good idea, because I haven't heard from them. This is 2018, we voted on this, right? So what I'm wondering is if there's a way to, maybe have them come to the committee and present what are some of the resources that they could offer as far as land use support, because that was one of the things they were supposed to offer support for. But I haven't heard anything 4 years later, and what their role can be, just so we get some information about that, because that was created to support the community boards in one area of that was supposed to be the process that we're engaged with as a committee.
Now I remember what you're talking about, because
And I'm sorry I wasn't ready with what that.
No, but you sparked. I mean, I don't remember the acronym, but this is when they were these referendum ballot issues under de Blasio, and one of them actually took certain roles and responsibilities from the borough president and gave it to this new entity that is controlled by the mayor. And it's okay, now what are they doing? So that would be an excellent follow-up. So I would say that would be both with the mayor's office and the borough president's office, and reach out to, once again to Mark Levine stuff, say, okay, from your perspective, and tell us who we need to reach out to. I think we have a mayor's office liaison who attends general meetings, but this will be a good presentation.
Good. Thank you.
Wayne, I have a couple of questions for Dave Tom.
Go ahead.
Dave, I thought that there was already a project underway at the car wash site. I thought there was an office building that was maybe already under construction.
It was, yes.
Isn't this right next door to the housing site with the Inwood Library?
Yes.
Is it under construction, or was it proposed for construction?
It appears that, I believe I looked up the permits, and they did some demolition. The site doesn't appear to have any real construction on it, so it seems that it was pre-development work. And for whatever reason, the site's now listed for sale, yours for 15 million. So whatever project was there seems to have stalled. And who knows, right? It might continue. The site might sell, and it might continue. It might come back as residential, but as of right, it's just something to keep an eye on, because that block has been much discussed and was rezoned, and something for the committee to keep an eye on as it develops.
Going back to the discussion we had about capital budget priorities, that would be an interesting site to also put in the bucket of sites we want the borough president to pay attention to.
Right. Well, Dave, speaking about that block, when I passed by recently, I noticed that Casa del Mofongo on the corner is now closed down. The neighboring storefront appears to be closed, and I'm wondering now whether that corner site is maybe for sale, or a possible development site.
If I put my developer hat on for a moment, the Inwood Library was very controversial, and it was pointed out by myself and others that the initial plan that went entirely against the library's own report as to, when they wrote their original report on which libraries were suitable for redevelopment, and they said, hey, we could do an 8-story building here with housing. And then out of the blue, it was proposed to do a much larger building, and that was kind of an illegal spot rezoning.
It really was not out of the blue. Anyone who attended, those EDC-led forums, and Dave, you've participated in these professionally, and so have I. When someone says, we have A, B, and C, and it's kind of, they're already hinting to you, what their Goldilocks solution is. And when folks talked about an 8 or 10 story being comfortable, the people who were there kind of as facilitators were not really that objective. They kept talking about the total scheme that was clearly what, EDC had in mind.
That's right. A, B, and C were all
not out
taller.
of the blue. It was
That's right.
signaled.
A, B, B, and C were all taller. I was the one writing in pen D, but anyways, the out of the blue was that they proposed that. But regardless, the point is that in order to avoid that being a spot rezoning, it got folded into the inward rezoning, and the entire block was greatly upzoned. So any developer would now tell you that yes, over the course of time, over the next decade or so, you would expect that the Casamapungo corner lot that's sitting on top of a subway station is ripe for redevelopment, and one would expect that it too will soon be a 14-story building or whatever it is that's now allowed there. But to date, there's been no broker listing for that one, Steve. I've only mentioned the other one because there was a published broker listing.
And just to be clear on that, because this is one of the points that the borough president's land use staff made, and I'm pretty certain that if the councilman was able to stay with us throughout, he would bring it up, because I believe I heard it from his staff. It's a hard argument to say that, on one hand, say, no, we're not against, new development, we're not NIMBY, but on any site that's proposed for increased density to allow for, development that is, bigger than what was permitted based on 60 zoning, that, we have a problem with that. I think if someone is saying you're on a wide street, you're near subway, and we're not saying that we think it has to be, 14 stories or whatever, but it is not, unexpected or unreasonable. And this is something reflecting back on the neighborhood planning and land use study that was finished like 2007, that, there are a number of sort of 1 or 2 story buildings sitting on Broadway or Amsterdam, or say like on major 2-way streets, some of them near subway, that they could take some greater density. And if you want to balance, which is what I'm hearing from the borough president and the council rep, that, they want to hear what are our thoughts on how do you balance preservation and preserving neighborhood character and accommodating, development. So going back to what Tanya and Vivian said about, and the development is more complicated than we like, and how do you do that? The car wash site or something like that, there may be a rational argument for saying that's a good, development site for something that is, bigger than a 5 or 6 story building, without saying that consideration should not be given to how it fits in with the rest of the neighborhood.
If I could just say, I raised this point about the potential development of that corner site without casting any judgment whatsoever. And we're just talking right now, I thought, about keeping our eyes open.
Absolutely.
As to what's happening in the community. And it looked to me, when I saw those closed storefronts, that something must be afoot at that corner site.
And I think these are excellent points. And as a matter of fact, going back to the borough president's request, not just the car wash site, but, the sites, on Broadway near that, I think those are sites that they should look at. They should monitor. And the extent to which those are privately owned sites and there is interest on the part of the private development community. And as I said jokingly, 10, 15 years ago, none of us live in the log cabins that our great-great-grandfathers built. So we all live in buildings that some developer built. But, maybe, the Borough President's Office, can engage them and help shape and understand what happens there, as opposed to just always being reactionary to the project once it's already gotten all the way down the line, and we're just looking at the fait accompli. Any other new business? It is 9:18. Is there a motion to adjourn? I see James Bosley, that is.
Second.
Good night, all.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.